Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Fictional Activity with Q and Atra. I'm Q.
I'm Atra.
It looks like we're sticking to that.
Yep.
Tonight, tonight with us we have Turel Soren from Clan Odan Say hi, Turel.
Hello.
I hear you're some sort of consul, is that correct?
Yes, I am many things. Consul, ACC champion, an ACC judge. So I get around.
Yeah, not tooting your own horn though.
Just a little bit.
So our primary topic today, aside from Turel telling us about his character and the fine nuances therein, we're going to be talking religion. Not to be confused with everyday average religion. We're talking Star Wars religion. So there's going to be a lot of debate over the Force.
Yes, the mystical energy that binds us, penetrates us, and does not ask for consent.
Phrasing.
Old Ben used it first, used it best. Got to stick to the classics.
First, let's just start off with Turel's introduction. Turel, tell us a little bit about your character. Just you can give us as much or as little detail as you like, albeit the more you give, the more time we take up in our program. So have at it.
Well, when I first created Turel, I was heavily influenced by my experience in real life with real life religion and those themes that come out. Because I think before I start talking about the character generally, we should probably take a step back and talk about religion as a theme in Star Wars because it is an important theme. I don't know if everyone's aware of this or not, but basically, from my understanding, when Lucas kind of developed the Jedi and all that stuff, it was basically Buddhism.
More or less.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Jedi, what they believe, attachment is bad, and all those things. I mean, it's very, very Buddhist.
Depending on your flavor of Buddhism, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so those themes of that, and then of the whole dark light dynamic, those are themes that show up in literature throughout time, and those are key cornerstones of almost every religion in existence. So
Yeah.
you mean,
And just look at the extended universe. It's about, if I were to pull it up on Wikia right now, there would be about 83 pages worth of religious organizations within Star Wars. That's not a small number considering, well, it's a small number if you consider this as a galaxy, but it's not a small number when you remember that everything is scaled up in Star Wars, cities or planets, yada yada, etc. It doesn't go into minutia. So,
yeah,
Wait, there's 83?
There are 83 pages that are categorized as religious organizations.
Huh.
That includes the extended universe.
Fair enough.
Well, sorry, legends.
Yeah, well. How big is that list now that we've gone to legends?
I don't know. I'd probably cut that to a quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Imperial Ermunu Navy doesn't exist anymore. And you got Scintilla Scavengers, Church of the First Frequency, Church of the Light, 8 cults. Like, it's all over the place.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you think about how religion works in the real world, that makes a lot of sense. Because let's take Christianity for example. Okay, it's not one uniform religion. There's all these subsects. People disagree. People adhere to things in different ways. People interpret the doctrine in different ways, and so that's something that I kind of try to stay true to when I'm dealing with something like the Jedi religion in Star Wars writing. There's a tendency I've seen in some authors and even in sort of fan fiction community like ours to try to treat the Star Wars type religions as some monolithic uniform thing. Like, okay, if you are a Jedi, you are always this. Well, if you look at how religion works in the real world, someone may identify as Catholic and they may have two people that identify as Catholic or something, or even Muslim for that matter, and they may have varying degrees of adherence to the doctrine, or they may interpret things in different ways. And so there's a lot more room for diversity, I think, than what most people conceive of. And I think in the new canon, you're seeing a lot more of that than what you saw in the old canon when it was written by Lucas, or generally Lucas led.
Well, I think we can see that kind of thing, if you look at your average everyday Jedi, the Force is this overarching energy, so to speak, and it's
Midichlorians.
yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is a large number see it as more of just a generic, not to use the same word twice, but a force that can be used for good or evil. Whereas guys like Qui-Gon Jinn believed in the what was it called?
The living
one
force.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so yeah, it's same crap, different smell. Kind of like what Turel was saying. I'm guessing if I'm understanding you properly.
Yeah, and then there's other things like some people would say, "Oh, the Jedi aren't allowed to marry," but there are Jedi in different periods, and if you look at Legends, there are different periods where they, just on that one issue that people associate, okay, all Jedi believe this. Well, no, they've gone back and forth.
Yeah,
And
well,
so you see a lot more diversity in the characters, even in the old Legends, even both before the Old Republic time frame, and even Luke himself in Legends, changed that role. So
yeah, well, it's a pretty straightforward concept of one guy fucks it up and ruins it for everyone else. So you got one person who falls to the dark side, quote unquote, for their attachment to family or something like that. Then the whole order's like, well, can't have that no more, and then they become all uptight about connections and stuff when it's like really, you know, yeah, it's religious restrictions at that point. But
And Qui-Gon's a good solid canon example of someone who still is like very much identifies with the Order. I'm a Jedi, but he doesn't necessarily agree with all of their tenets or even like everything the Council decides. He
you'd be
kind
on
of
the council
follows
if you wouldn't stop questioning them.
exactly.
Except now he's cut in half. So
Nope, stabbed through the stomach. Darth Maul got cut in half.
oh right, holy shit! I need to go watch the prequels again.
Yeah, which raises the question of the Sith sort of religion. I don't know what that was based on, if anything at all, other than
I think it's just polar opposite of the Jedi business. One is austere, monk-like. The other is more. I don't want to use this as a definitive term, but look at it like, since we're using the Catholics, let's look at the Roman Empire era and how Christianity was this austere, very regimented religion. And then you go north a few hundred miles and you've got Gaul, Germania, and all these very non-austere religions where they're practicing human sacrifice. And there's, granted, Rome was known for its orgies anyway, but these were folk that brought it into a religious aspect. And I'm probably perverting the history on this, but that's kind of how I see Sith compared to Jedi. It's all that regimented austerity is just gone. It's however you want to do it, go for it.
I mean, you also have to look at how the galaxy looks at these religions, because by the end of the Clone Wars, the whole image of the Jedi as peacekeepers and whatnot was completely replaced with warmongers and like just yeah.
I mean, that is kind of Star Wars galactic history in a nutshell.
The good guys become the bad guys. It's a constant push and pull.
I was going to say Warlord crops up. There's a period of war.
Yeah,
Warlord is defeated.
That always happens. First it was the Sith, then it was the Sith as a religion, and then there's always a big bad. First Order. If that doesn't have religious connotations, I don't know what is.
Well, yeah, and you look at the Knights of Ren and Snoke, and it's not even clear they're even Sith. They're just kind of dark side of their own flavor.
And so a few Darksiders,
yeah. So I'm interested to see how in Episode 8 they treat the whole Jedi side of things when Luke, having reflected on his failures as a teacher or his perceived failures, I'm assuming because he put himself in exile. and how that affects how he trains Rey in the future, and what the future sort of Jedi looks like in the new canon.
Well, based on what Rey is wearing, I'd say the future Jedi looks brunette, pretty slim, good figure, and wearing a lot of khaki.
I don't know. She was wearing blue at the end of episode 7.
Was she? Oh yeah,
Yep.
because she did get the wardrobe change. I forgot about
Yep.
that.
The prerequisite wardrobe change. She's no longer the Tatooine. Sorry, Jakku origin story. That just kind of slipped out there.
Yeah, I gotta wonder why are all these people colonizing desert worlds? Ugh.
Because, well, in the argument of Jakku, there's really no reason why it had to be a desert planet other than striking the whole similarity kind of thing, nostalgia trigger. But the reasoning behind Jakku being occupied as a desert planet is because of the Battle of Jakku. There's a lot of stuff there to be salvaged and stolen.
Mm.
And then you have the aftermath novels that tell us that apparently, because, it's a small galaxy, you have Palpatine assigning a workforce to excavate something important on Jakku, and assigning some unknown guy to overseeing it. So they're definitely trying to create something more of the Force and the history of Star Wars that we have yet to see. They've been hinting heavily that the quote unquote source of the dark side is something that comes from outside the galaxy rather than within the known galaxy. So the future of religion in Star Wars is really interesting right now from an academic perspective. Sucks for us because we don't know what the heck's going on.
Fucking Disney.
But it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it is, but taking it from the macro level and now bringing it down to how the individual character interacts with these religions and these themes, I think
I was
it's
hoping we'd get to this.
yeah, that's what I'm getting back. So now that we've kind of set the stage and talked about the background of religion in Star Wars generally, and how it either tracks or doesn't track with sort of how religions work in real life. Personally, I came from a background, from kind of a very evangelical background. So like themes of, redemption and that whole thing was something that I was very familiar with. So that was something that found expression in my art. So when I designed Turel, and also redemption is kind of a very core theme of the entire Star Wars saga, if you look at it as a whole. I mean, the whole thing, if you look at it from now, it's about the at least the first 6 are about the fall and redemption of Anakin Skywalker. Also, I wanted to try to treat the Jedi religion as, because a theme in sort of real world religion and in art and other places is that religion is a struggle. It's not something that you just automatically do. And I think sometimes people depict Jedi specifically that way, that they're just, and it's because they're raised from birth. So they are the kind of monks or such, but you don't really get to see them when they're younger, or when they're struggling with living up to these ideals that are very hard for a person to live up to. I mean, like having no attachments, all that. I mean, that takes years and discipline, and you don't really see the struggle. You just see people just like in the order, just kind of being Jedi. And I wanted to have someone that joined later in life, who had a pretty dark background, but that turned his back on it and sought the redemption piece of it. And I liked that theme. I thought it was powerful. And I've seen other characters obviously use similar themes and such, but I just wanted to depict the Jedi religion as something other than being static. Like it is a daily struggle to live up to that.
Yeah, and especially in Odan where it's not so much doctrine as philosophy. You don't require every NFU that joins Odan to swear to the Jedi Code. You guys don't even follow the Jedi Code for the most part yourselves. It's an ideal.
Yeah, there's sort of a loose cult in getting into the Brotherhood lore, like Unor, sort of this offshoot, which goes in back to the discussion of the real world religion and how they have different branches that break off and whatever.
Well, yeah,
While
you
they
have
were
the church
founded by Jedi, but you have people who adhere to it in different ways, even back in the old days before NFUs and Greys were allowed, when everybody was in theory Jedi. all the characters interpreted things, lived things differently. You had your more traditional Jedi like Liam and Vorsa, and you had others that were probably would more be considered gray by today's standards.
Oh yeah. Well, and even in Star Wars, there's sects in it too. There's the Jedi, then there's the Church of the Force. They're not the same thing. Yes, they idolize the Jedi, but they don't follow the same tenets. They have families, they have children, they have all this fun stuff, but they believe in the Force and the light side and the dark side, and in preserving that.
And I'm just kind of disappointed that when you said sects, you were talking about religion still.
Yes, unfortunately. That's a
We're
topic.
getting onto a really fun one.
That's a
Well,
topic for another day.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Jedi Order has some things to say about that,
Yeah.
or did.
Yeah, the Jedi
So
Order is not a
only
thing
preached
anymore.
They only preached against attachment. They never preached against sex per se. So in theory, you could have one night stands, and if you weren't emotionally attached, then you could still be a good Jedi.
I'm just
Or at
saying.
least in theory.
So long as you don't staple yourself to the other person and become physically attached. No conjoined twins. in the
No,
Jedi
this
Order.
is not Human Centipede. This is neither part 1 nor 2 and neither 3.
That there was a 2 and 3 is kind of disturbing. No, not kind of disturbing. Extremely disturbing.
I'm just saying that the red light district probably popped up around the Jedi Temple. Just theorizing. There's no proof.
Oh, hell yeah.
I don't. Well, if real life religion is any indication, then you're probably right. That's a whole nother theme. You could talk about religious hypocrisy.
I mean, alternatively, you could say that, you had the Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters, and then you had the choir boys, aka the younglings. And that's just when it gets weird.
Well, Yoda did seem a little too interested in Luke in Empire.
Oh.
Well, I mean, they
his-
were about the same
rubbing-
height.
Rubbing his shoulders.
Having to be
making him
carried
feel sweaty.
around everywhere.
Oh, Luke, I thought you said Anakin for a second. I am getting
No.
totally brain farted today.
It's all that medication you're on.
Yeah, apparently. That's what happens when your jaw gets
That's-
locked up.
Yoda had to live on Dagobah because he couldn't live within 5 parsecs of a school zone.
There's a restraining order.
He made it like it was some kind of exile thing, but really it was a
Yeah.
court order.
And the fine print is, if they come to him, he's not breaking his restraining order.
Nope.
God.
That's why R2 didn't like him. He looked him up in the Galactic Sex Offender Registry.
He didn't have to. R2 never had a memory wipe at all, ever in canon. He remembered everything.
Well, that raises a whole other series of questions because there are things he could have told people at various
So
times that would
much.
have saved them some trouble.
This is why you don't do prequels after the fact and not account for that. Like, R2 was all like, oh no, you're cool, important, and helpful. We want you to remember all this stuff. But C-3PO, that golden guy that was made by Darth Vader, wipe him. He doesn't need to remember nothing. He talks too much. All R2-D2 does in
that is
episode
his
4, 5, and
job.
6 is swear. That's why you can't understand him. Have you seen that redub?
I have.
It's so good. It's like Cousin It. You can't understand him because it's all swear words.
Now, circling back to religion in Star Wars, I think
Yes, thank you.
one thing that's going to be interesting when Rogue One comes out is my understanding is they have a character who's not a Jedi, who is not Force sensitive, but yet follows that sort of religion. He sort of believes in the Force.
Yep.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. And I love the direction they're going when they're playing this. They're bringing in a lot more, kind of ideological diversity into these older concepts.
Yeah, and it's hard to sit here and be like, is it a spoiler? Is it not a spoiler? Because this is content that came from Catalyst, but you might learn it in Rogue One, but at the same time, it's not going to change anything about Rogue One, so it's hard to say is it bad or not. But they're really going heavy into this Church of the Force thing. They're putting it everywhere since they introduced it as a concept. So you have the blind monk played by Donnie Yen, I think is his name. Apologies if
so.
I messed it
Yeah.
up. And then you have Jyn Orso's mother, is Church of the Force lady, and so yeah, they're going all in on that.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
yeah, the planet they're on as well. That you see a lot in the desert planet. Ooh, shocking. That you see a lot in the Rogue One trailers is they're calling it the Mecca of Jedi religion. So
Interesting.
yeah, so like in all the overhead shots when you see the statues and stuff, not to be confused with Tolkien's statues facing each other at the waterfall, because nothing is original anymore. And
Hey,
those
grandiose statues are cool.
yeah, that are bigger than they have any right to be. How long
Hey,
did
if
it
we
take
can-
you to make this statue to my magnificence? Oh, it took me my whole life, sir. Well, you failed. My nose is not that big. Go have a son so that he may spend his life correcting your fuck up.
Hell, can you imagine if, say George Washington were to see Mount Rushmore nowadays?
I do not recall my ears being that big.
It doesn't even show his ears.
Exactly. Yeah, so
Ooh,
I'm
boy.
it's a hard topic to get into because so much of religion in Star Wars is now legends.
Well, it's in a state of flux right now, and
Yeah.
that's true probably for like just about any topic that we could bring up about the universe. It's an exciting time to kind of be a part of this community and see how things are unfolding, because it is all very fresh and new. I know some people have some hurt feelings about the EU going away, and I don't want to. That's a topic for another time.
But at the same time, they're not completely disregarding it. They recognize that there's good information there, and if they can bring back what was good, they
Like
will.
Thrawn,
But
they
the
brought back
issue
Thrawn in a
was
good way.
there was no unified approach to canon back then. It was whatever this author thought worked, and then George Lucas just goes, "Yeah, that sounds fine, whatever." But there was no organized approach to it, and there is now. So that's why they can bring back what worked and leave out what didn't, because some things were just not good.
Thrawn.
Yeah, and you got the Lucas team now overseeing the reintroduction of Thrawn, and I have yet to see anything in canon that says overpowered Mary Sue in terms of the strategies and all that other fun stuff. So, and I'm hoping that the novel continues that, even though it's written by Zahn, it's overseen by the canon division, the story division. So, I mean, I'll be happy if it brings back Salamari, because those are a neat little caveat, even though they don't make much sense.
Oh, the force nullifying lizards.
Yep. Which, by the way, developed that trait because the things that love to hunt them, the Vornskers, hunt by sensing the force. So becoming a force bubble is kind of a good, not nature's way of concealing oneself from your predator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which bears the question, religion versus nature when it comes to the force. Because you got the three deities in the Clone Wars, if we want to call them the deities, the father, the sister, and the brother that represent.
Didn't they retcon that a little bit? I
Yeah.
recall reading something somewhere that they were actually some sort of alien race. They weren't actually some sort of deity.
The Forerunners.
It's
I hated that. I loved when they said Clone Wars is canon, but I hated that particular episode being canon because it is so
yeah.
convoluting, and
It just
so,
doesn't fit in the themes of the Clone Wars, really. Like what had been in that show up to that point, nothing prepared you for it, and then they never touched on it again after that.
Throw out of left field, and we're just gonna forget about it. Okay, moving along.
It's like they let
Yeah.
it's like they let some disgruntled fantasy writer, like high fantasy writer, like in and wrote an episode, and then they're like, okay, moving along.
It's not like they don't have, like, I could consider that precedence, if you will, because the next thing that they included in one episode and hand waved away as never happening is flying lightsabers.
The Helisaber. I'm so glad I don't watch these shows.
They're actually not bad and give a lot of good things. I really like the Bendu stuff in this season of Rebels. It's
It
really
was
great.
so vague, though. It was just
Oh,
there. It was there and it's gone. Poof.
but what
They,
it opens up the questions that people are asking. It gives you an answer, and then it creates questions.
well, it reinforces the notion that there are
There's more
perspectives and
facets.
things. Yet there's more than just Sith and Jedi, and I think that's totally the direction the new canon's going. As
Yeah,
much as
and I
I
love
like
that.
to
That
rag on everyone being a gray special snowflake,
yeah, I like that. It's the whole that an object is neither good nor evil. It is the intent. And I'm like, yes.
love that they got. Oh God, why is his name escaping me? He's famous for being on Doctor Who as the voice.
He was also the president in V for Vendetta.
No, he wasn't. No. This is a different actor. It's Tom Baker was the voice of the Bendu. He was the fourth Doctor. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
That's true, Tom
Hey,
Baker.
that's what we do.
No, it's relevant. Yeah, and then they do like that weird thing where a dark side holocron and a light side holocron they don't play well together.
But you need both to do something. And spoilers for the last season of Rebels.
Yeah, spoilers for this current season of Rebels, like 4 episodes ago. You've been warned. This is your spoiler warning. Pause now and jump ahead, I don't know, 3 minutes if you don't want to be spoiled. Darth Maul and what's his face? Ezra. Thank you.
Ezra.
Sit down because a dark sider can't open a light side holocron, and a light sider can't open a dark side holocron without dipping into the dark side. Anyways, open them up, merge them together. Oh my gosh, giant glowing light. They're now omnipotent for whatever reason. Holocrons combining grant, like, clairvoyance for whatever reason.
Which, how does that even work? Because a holocron is a limited.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a
database.
repository of knowledge.
Yeah, but
yet they come together to become the holy grail of knowledge, because not only it reveals some stuff that elude me at this moment in time to Ezra, but to Darth Maul it leaves him flying away in a ship not to be seen again for several episodes. He still hasn't come back, muttering something about he's alive, aka oh well, Darth Maul now knows Obi-Wan somewhere, and you just opened up a path for Obi-Wan and Darth Maul having a fight on Tatooine.
Oh joy.
Which I'm looking forward to, frankly.
I'm looking forward to, but past experience shows they don't have the guts to resolve things the way they should. So in theory, if that happened, the resolution should be Darth Maul finally dies. Like Obi-Wan killed him. Like that should just be.
He
like,
needs to die.
That's the only way that
Oh
needs to end.
God, yes.
Just
When
like
I heard he was
Vader,
back.
when Vader and Ahsoka faced off, Vader should have killed Ahsoka. Like,
Yes.
That should have been the end. Like she should have died.
Well, that happens
They
a lot.
did.
Like the reason they claim that the reason they're not doing Obi-Wan movies right now is because the episodic movies aren't quote unquote finished with Obi-Wan. Yeah, I read that interview a couple weeks ago, and it's like, really? What? Want to run that one past me again?
Okay, you want to talk about Star Wars religion? Obi-Wan totally. He thought about breaking the whole not getting married rule.
Yeah,
And that
because
arc in Clone Wars, yeah, him and that pacifist chick.
Well, it's not even just that. Surprisingly enough, they pulled from some really old novels. Obi-Wan as a kid was actually a novel series, and they had the time when those two characters met plays out in those novels, and those were actually some of the better ones of those novels. Also, Qui-Gon's previous apprentice before Obi-Wan went to the dark side, and that's why he never got a new apprentice. He always showed up to the apprentice selection ceremony, but never picked one because his last one went bad. But he picks Obi-Wan for some godforsaken reason. That aside, because it's scholastic novels.
The Force called to me.
More like Obi-Wan didn't give him a fucking choice. Stubborn little bastard. Yeah, and that actually had lightsabers in training sessions would singe flesh and burn hair and that kind of stuff. You could actually turn down the power setting on your lightsabers so that it wouldn't kill someone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just
Which makes sense. You wouldn't give little kids deadly weapons.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, yes, Obi-Wan is like the Jedi, the one who upheld the tenets no matter the cost, but he still felt love.
Yes.
He loved her,
Yes.
whether he chose to leave the order or stay with it. You can't choose to love someone or not.
Yes, and I wish they would have expanded on that a little bit and shown it like that, show him being, being tempted more or less to leave the order. And leaving the order wasn't without precedence. I mean, people did it
Yep.
all over canon. I mean, Dooku just said, "Peace out. I'm going to go be a count or whatever now."
More or less.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like it wasn't without precedence. So
But I think
I would have liked to have seen him struggle with that. It would have made that moment in the series more powerful.
and that's just what I want to see out of my religion in Star Wars is struggle.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
not
yes.
easy.
There's enough of a especially when it comes to the Force, and we've been
Temptation.
concentrating very heavily on the Force as the big religious thing, and that's because it is a very overarching
Well, it could be argued that there's very few races
theme.
that don't believe in the Force. They can give it other names, but it's
Well,
always
let's also look at it as uh, let's look at it from a character perspective. Let's see, you got someone who, yeah, the Force is a thing. Roger, that guy over there is floating a plate 3 feet off the ground just by looking at it.
yeah. I can't disprove the Force is a thing. Look at him lift his peach into the air.
But I mean, it stands to reason that there's also folks that acknowledge the Force, but also don't believe that the Force is the creator of the universe or the overwatching deitic figure that's guiding their path or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, like choice versus prophecy, fate, whatever, what have you.
Well, I'm just saying God or gods in conjunction with the Force.
Yep. It's a thing. Some people can manipulate it, some people can't, but it doesn't have a conscience. Like that's a view some people would have. There's no will of the Force.
And that's getting into the whole, does the Force come in flavors, or is it just how you use it that defines what is dark and light?
And that's even a debate in the DJB itself. Like
Oh, yes.
some members feel that way, some don't. How we view the powers in terms of our system is yes, intent makes a power. Lightning is most notably the one where people go, well, why can't a Jedi use lightning? Well, because there's no reason they can't. Their philosophy just generally says don't do it because you have to draw on powerful emotions. And their religion views powerful emotions as a crutch, as something to be avoided and not done, which is why you don't see them throwing lightning out willy-nilly.
It's also why Vapad is hijack. It's also why Vapad is generally shunned.
Because it relies on you tapping into emotions, aggression, etc., creating that conduit with your opponent, feeling how they're feeling, and that kind of stuff. Which is why in Legends, there were so many failed practitioners of Vapad. Only Mace Windu could do it, and he taught it to a few people, and they just usually fell to the dark side. So, yeah.
All right. Well, while we got a break in the action, Turel, gonna go back to my original question that I guess just you started on but didn't really go through. Tell us about your character. Tell us about Turel Soren.
Well, for those unfamiliar with the character, he grew up on Nar Shaddaa, which is like a hut moon, very kind of ghetto-y, really trashy place. And his mother was like a bar owner, and his father was a kind of sort of not high-ranking guy, but sort of like a senior enforcer type dude in the Hut cartel. So he kind of grew up on the streets in a very kind of rough environment. And long story short, skipping ahead, he ends up, running the gang life. He ends up in the Hut cartel, does some pretty nasty things, just to survive. It just becomes normal. Some pretty brutal stuff. But it never sets right with him. Like he didn't choose that life. He was just kind of born into it. It just became, it was all he knew. But I think if he was given the choice, it's fundamentally the kind of person he is. I don't know that he would have chosen that. So he struggled with it later in life, and eventually some things happened, and it caused him to just reject it one day. and it's a theme that shows up, in literature and other places, and in the real world with religion, where people sort of have that moment where they kind of hit rock bottom or whatever, and they're like, okay, I want to change, I need to change, and so he leaves it, and then he wanders around for a while, and eventually stumbles into the Jedi. And he had always grown up like everything he knew about Jedi was the old legends. They were the peacekeepers of the galaxy. I mean, I think by that time, some of the old stuff about them being warmongers would have faded, in 20, 30 years. And, if anyone spoke of them, it would have been the old legends. And so he looked up to that idea, and he's like, that's what I want to be. I want to be proud of who I am. So he chose it. But being who he is and coming into it much later in life, it's hard for him. He's inherently a very passionate, often rash person, and so like the ideals of the Jedi are really, really hard, and he screws up a lot. But he's also very stubborn, and that's what he wants to be. He's a Jedi because he chooses to be, not necessarily because he would fit neatly into the alignment category. If you objectively just looked at him, you'd say he's probably gray, maybe light path gray, but kind of he's probably more in the middle. But he is very adamant that I am a Jedi. I identify with it, and I may not be very good at it, but I'm going to keep doing it. And that's where the theme, what Atra is talking about, the theme of struggle, and struggling with your past, struggling with your inherent nature, when the religion conflicts with that, because that's a very powerful thing in most of the Western religions, is that mankind is inherently sinful, and that you have to struggle, be it in most of the Abrahamic religions, you have to struggle to keep the tenets, keep the code, make yourself holy, to use the religious terminology. So in Jedi parlance, you would say that he was trying to become more, I don't know, peaceful. I don't know how I would what adjective I would use to describe somebody who's trying to become more Jedi-like. But am I making sense, or am I rambling?
A little bit of both.
I mean, that's how he approaches it. Is that he's trying to be better than he was, and it's an ideal that he strives for. That's his approach to it. I know other characters approach the whole Sith, Jedi, or whatever Force religion thing differently, but for him, it's a path to become better than he was. So simplifying.
Okay, so short version: Turel started out as a street urchin. Let's see if I can speak English. And decided that wasn't the life for him. Joined the Jedi, and now he's the Consul of Odan. How'd that happen?
That's a whole nother thing.
So and let's not forget your tree bush girlfriend.
Wife, actually.
Yeah, that too.
That happened.
Yeah, that was a thing. So as he progresses in his journey as a Jedi, post joining, so that gets him up to joining the Brotherhood. So he joins the Jedi. He wants to become better than he is, and he's like, okay. And so then he starts getting invested in this ongoing conflict that Unor's having, and he likes to fight and all that. So like he kind of gravitates towards that, and he is apprenticed to Vir Vorsa, who is a 400-year-old Neti. Who is a expanded universe species that they are, I think, basically plants, but they live a very long time. So she has a completely different perspective on things. And so his career progresses. He takes on leadership roles because he is sort of a natural leader. People do tend to gravitate to him, even though often he's not very confident in himself. He doesn't, as a Jedi, he doesn't think that people should ever follow him. And in fact, the only two apprentices he's had, both of them now have gone to the dark side. So he doesn't really feel that strongly that he's someone that, as a Jedi, people should follow. But, then this whole thing in New Tython happens. Well, let me back up a little bit. So there was a point where he did get frustrated with the Jedi and the Council and the way things are going, because at the time it was led by Liam, who was a more traditional Jedi type. So that was the tone the Council took. They were very more straight line Jedi. And he's like, we have this conflict and we should, he was more of the ends justify the means, very more pragmatic way of looking at things. And that conflicted with some of his elders. And so he ends up, long story short, he ends up in Arcona. So he sort of goes to the dark side for a while. And that culminates in the Great Jedi War, where he fought against Udnor, and that was a change moment for him because he actually gets captured by them and interrogated by Vorsa, who they didn't really have romantic feelings at the time, but anyway, it showed him that how he was slipping back. So if you remember, he started with this whole thing of I want to be better. So then when he falls to the dark side, he's kind of backpedaling a little bit. He's becoming more like his old self. So that causes him to question everything. He leaves Arcona, comes back to Udnor, and when the whole thing with New Tython happens, he just sort of rises up in the ranks as people sort of gravitate to him because he's sort of this paragon natural leader type, even though he doesn't really want to be, that people sort of just gravitate towards. So when Alora leaves, they all vote him in because the way they work it is it's democratic. So they vote him as High Counselor, and now everything is on his shoulders, and that's where he's at right now. Is he's sort of struggling with how do you conduct this war? There's the more pragmatic people that are like, hey, we do whatever you need to do. If you need to kill people, so be it. Whatever. Lives are at stake. This is a war. It's not a time to be nice.
Meanwhile, I'm just sitting here chuckling because you guys call it a war. Other perspective calls it terrorist people.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, it's a resistance movement, so it's very much a terrorist thing. They are doing terrorist activities. I'm not going to shy away from that. I mean, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter. I mean, they view it as legitimate. But then again, every terrorist group ever always thinks that they're legitimate.
Perspectives are nasty like that.
Yeah. The winners write the history books. So now he's stuck between, he's responsible for protecting all these people and their lives and preventing another New Tython situation from happening. But how do you go about that? And so there's this conflict between the ideals of the Jedi, and then there's the need to fight the war. So that's where he's at now. So his religion is conflicting. His ideals of being a Jedi and his religion are conflicting with the day-to-day reality of being a leader in this war. And how do you do it and stay true to yourself without losing yourself? Which I'm going to try to develop that later because it has some themes with my sort of experience in real life with our the good old war on terrorism and how sometimes ideals give way to necessity, and there's always a cost. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and the cost right now is that Turel is significantly less viewed as a happy boy of late. You've traded in your clothes for the all black set. Watch out!
I'm not sure he's quite as moody as Atra just yet.
Atra isn't moody. He has no moods. He has no feelings.
Turel's mellowing out. There was a period, especially around the time when the championship was going on, and that was when he was like super moody. And so you saw that come out a lot in a lot of the matches. Because to me, and which is another topic, the way I approach ACC matches is I always try to make them canon if possible. And so you have this character development. So yeah, in those matches, in that event, you got to see him at his moodiest when he is really struggling with that anger, especially anytime him and Salika are in the same vicinity. Also,
oh goodness,
yeah, that rivalry, pretty epic.
It's all about getting you to become the bad guy, and not killing her in the process is her end goal.
Yeah, well,
I just wondered how her clothes stay on during combat.
Lots of tape. Tape is her friend.
A lot of tape. Duct tape.
I'm going to say the Force.
The Force.
No way to explain.
That's fair enough.
Remind me to write her having a wardrobe malfunction next time we have a fight.
Sure.
I will do so.
We will do so.
I don't think anyone's done that yet.
No, we've had telekinetic strike to the massive memories, which would knock somebody off course. That's happened.
I'm waiting. God, if only Q were a Force user, telekinetic strike to the gonads.
Force grip doesn't have to be used on throats.
I mean,
Force hand job.
Really, dude? Really?
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Well,
PG,
you know what?
PG-13. So
No.
let's go back to religion.
We put a disclaimer on this podcast for a reason.
Well, okay. So before we run out of time, there was something I wanted to
No, we
address
still got time.
because so we've talked about struggle, and we've always talked about it from the perspective of someone struggling to be good and struggling against the darkness. What we saw in episode 7, which was a pretty interesting theme, was Kylo was struggling with the light.
Yes,
He
I
was
love
trying to
that.
be dark side, and he felt the call of the light. And so I thought that was a fascinating concept that both sides of the Force would call. And he blames Vader's compassion for his downfall, that he wasn't, didn't do what he needed to do to, maintain his power, or what have you, however you want to, explain that. But the whole concept of struggling with the light is something I don't think we see very often.
No, I mean, I would argue that's what my character goes through, but that would be oddly self-serving. So I don't quite do it that masterfully, but it is something that isn't seen enough, and it needs to be addressed because there are two facets to this. It's just as hard to be all bad as it is to be all good. I mean, it's much more satisfying to be all bad.
And this is why it's nice to be gray.
Yep.
Gray
Well,
pride.
let's talk about being gray for a second. So,
What does that mean?
what does that mean to be gray? And is there a struggle with being gray, of not falling to one side or the other, maintaining sort of a balance? Or
Well, that's the thing is, and I kind of talked about this in some of my Shadow Academy exams, ironically enough, is that Han Solo could be considered not gray. He's very much light because he always does what's right. Yes, he's a scoundrel, but he
When
always
he's not
does the
smuggling
right
and
thing.
breaking the law and stuff.
Yeah, but the law was the law of the Empire, and the law of the Empire was wrong. So he is the lovable scoundrel would fall into that. So it's hard to stay gray because people have a habit of falling on one side or the other. There's no perfect middle ground. You're always going to favor some decisions over the other. Like, how should I phrase this? If I walk around with a flamethrower setting an entire city on fire just to flush out one dude, I would not call myself gray. However, at the same
That
time,
would definitely be like chaotic evil kind of stuff.
yeah, but then immediately after that, you take a share of your bounty and you pay the benefactors to rebuild afterwards.
It's
Are-
a hell
are
of a
you
bounty
gray?
if you're rebuilding a city.
Like, I know it's a bad example, but think about it. It's the meter is constantly shifting. Your actions are being balanced, and it is a tightrope walk. You can't say it's not. It's as much of a tightrope to be gray as it is to be pure evil and pure good. We
I don't
like
know.
to,
That seems like way too strict of a view on something that is a very objective,
It's-
basically personality meter.
but it's not objective in Star Wars. That's what's really rough about it. is that's
Correction, subjective. My bad.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Star Wars is black and white. It doesn't like the moral gray. You're either the good guys or you're the bad guys. There's no in between. Look at what Maz Kanata says in the cantina in episode 7 that you avoid like the plague. She says that there's always a dark side, there's always a Sith, there's always a First Order. It's
No, I actually liked her.
It's the only battle that matters, the battle between the light and the dark.
Oh, I
Which
thought we were going to talk about the.
encompasses Star Wars. That is always Star Wars. It is always the theme of Star Wars. It is black and white, cut and dry. You're either good or you're bad. There's no, he's a bad guy, but he's also a good guy. It's no, you switch alliances. You're no longer a bad guy once you stop being the bad guy. Which I don't personally like as a writer. I like the moral ambiguity of the middle ground.
That's kind of how I viewed Boba Fett, as kind of a middle grounder.
Well, and the extended universe really drove that point home.
Mm-hmm. Went and became Mandalore, and really
and he
just
had no
served-
issues. He had no issues working with them. He worked with the Jedi.
No.
Against Yuuzhan Vong, mind you. But
Oh yeah.
he also worked with them against Darth Caedus for that arc. Which is my favorite arc.
I was really hoping Mara Jade had come back because that redhead was spicy.
Okay, DB isn't your personal erotica site.
As much as
No,
you try and make it.
that's expanded universe. It doesn't belong to the
I
DB.
mean, I know.
So
I'm just
suck
giving you a
it.
hard time.
So Turel, what would you like to see from Brotherhood? If you could, like, if you were temporarily the Grandmaster, what what shift, what sort of change would you like to see from the Brotherhood,
Um,
other than ponies?
well, no, I would like to see things kind of go back into balance. And what I mean by that is, I think with the recent, starting with the whole undesirables thing, I think things are too one-sided. I think you have basically everybody's resistance now, and that's no fun.
Tell me
I
about
see it
it.
as people should the side should be relatively equally appealing to whoever, and you should be able to pick them. And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable being space Nazis or whatever, or they don't want to play that. And so if I could change something, I would shift things back so it's more of a 50-50 or even something else.
Yeah. Well, and
But
also
that's-
like the loyalty all these quote unquote darksiders have to their clan is like, why? I'm like, all you Sith should be loyal to yourselves. Otherwise, you're
know,
not a
right?
Sith.
I know, right? You're not a Sith. Yeah, people are very flippant with Sith philosophy. That's why when I created an Inquisitor NPC, I made her very, very ambitious. Like she would totally stab Merrick in the back, like with a second,
who wouldn't?
without hesitating. Yeah. Well, let's not get meta. Let's not get too meta on that one. But it just as an example. But you never read that. Like if you look at the other like voice NPCs or whatever, they're all like super loyal assassin lapdogs that never try to go against their masters. And I'm like, that is not Sith. That is not the Sith way.
Revan and Malak. Malak is like, oh, they all the Jedi just boarded Revan's ship. Okay, fire.
Yeah, and most of the Dark Counselors are that way. Like they develop their characters, so they're all very loyal to the Dark Council. Like even Veer is shifting Morgan in that direction, and I know he's going to listen to this eventually. But like,
yeah, well,
I don't know. I like them having they need to have their own agendas, and they need to.
Well, it depends on if your character is a Sith or not. In Morgan's defense, not a Sith.
Right, but he started her with this whole double agent type premise, and now she's sort of becoming more friendlier and friendlier.
Become
to
what
Dark
you hate.
Council. Yeah, well, that's another thing you could always bring up as a theme. You do inevitably become what you hate.
Yep.
And I think if I wasn't in like a clan leadership position, that's where I'd go with, because I think Turel's natural reaction to New Tython wouldn't have been what he did. He would have almost gone like full on Punisher type. And that would have turned him into what he hated, and that's where he would have gone eventually. Obviously, that brings up another topic of when you're in a unit leadership position, like what you do with your character and stuff has an influence on the clan and the clan's lore.
Mm-hmm.
And you should always try to be true to what the clan is.
There should.
And I wish Addie was here for this, because she could probably speak on this pretty well, because her character obviously is what she is. I mean, Atra is more Jedi than Turel is, objectively speaking. And she's in charge of this clan of like assassins, and how do you reconcile that? Well, a lot of hand waving, and well, we're loyal to the clan or whatever, but
well, there's different ways of going about it, because honestly, you could have your character be this self-serving Sith, but you'd have to walk a very careful tightrope, because you need to pick and choose your battles, and because we can't kill other people's player characters, it's hard to do that whole ambition campaign, because you're in a rut. You're not going to move through the unit leadership through backstabbing, etc. So it's hard to do that, but at the same time, you can't force a change on the philosophy of the clan. You can't turn Nagasato into Odan Light. I can't turn
Udnor into Arcona Light.
You can't.
Gray,
you can't look at Plagueis, and I hate to say this, but their whole slave caste system is ingrained in their identity at this point.
But that's great, because they are trying. It's not my cup of tea, but it's great they're doing that. They're actually trying to be dark side.
Yeah.
Instead of just the kind of very blah, and that's good, and that's why I like having. And I enjoy writing with Slagar, because Salika and Turel are such opposites. They're such a foil to each other that it's really it's a nice, interesting rivalry to hit.
It's rough because like if you look at Arcona until most recently, you could call them professional fence sitters, and then the three-way competition forced them to
I'm not
officially
going
be
to comment.
aside.
I'm not going to I'm not going to comment on that because that's a sore point. I
And then you
might
look
have
at
been over.
Tarentum. Tarentum is dark, like dark, but like, hey, we're gonna raise the dead. The dead have been raised, and we don't care if you don't want to serve us. We slit your throat. We raise you. You serve us anyways.
The,
And even they're like, oh, we want to work with you guys. We want to side with Odin against Pravis. No, the only way this angle works is if you want to usurp Pravis, because there's nothing else that makes sense here.
Yeah, and circling a little bit back to religion. So let
That's
me
fine.
bring
All
up,
of it's religion, really.
yeah, it's all religion. But let me circle that back. So we're talking about the brotherhood and clan identity and things of that nature. Well, this sort of relates to that. So one of my big pet peeves, and I think I've gone on rants and fiction chat about this, is how a
Probably.
lot of people view Star Wars religion through the lens of the BioWare games and the BioWare morality scale. Okay, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, you know what? At the risk of pushing us over an hour mark, bring it the fuck on. Let's do it.
Leroy Jenkins.
Yep, let's do it. Going balls in.
Yeah, we can edit out some of my ranting from earlier. Or
No way.
mine.
No, this is juicy. Okay, BioWare, just BioWare in general is the rule of cool when it comes to Star Wars. That's all they care about. It doesn't need to make sense. I don't like dual wielding a staff saber and a regular saber. No, but religion in BioWare. Go.
Yeah, so if you look at what most people conceive of, and this has influenced people's like ideas of the Force and all this, is the whole like Tor or Knights of the Old Republic, the whole morality scale. Where if I go kick a puppy, well then I get a light or dark side point, and it pushes me to the dark side, and da 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 da, and it gives me access to dark side only powers, and that's just not how it works. I mean, we've hit on some of these points, in other contexts, but I think that mode of thinking has influenced people's perception on the quote unquote alignment so much.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to walk into situations in your writing and be presented with click left for Paragon, right for Renegade. It's not going to, that's not how it works. It's not one moment in time. One decision determines if you're plus 10 bad or plus 10 good. It is everything your character does, everything they are, what they believe in, what they do for that belief that determines your alignment.
Yeah, and it's more complicated than that. I mean, it distilling it down to that scale, of everything falls into this one galactic scale of light versus dark, and and I think even within Star Wars, even though light versus dark is his main theme in Star Wars, I think it's more complicated than that. That it's some actions you may take an action for the right reason that might have a bad outcome. Does that give you a dark side point or whatever? I mean, that's the problem with that mode of thinking. Is it's overly simplistic from a morality standpoint.
Let's look at one of the more complex characters I've seen in the DB lately that seems to run the gamut of what alignment am I, what am I doing. Blade's character, which you're about to engage with in the Rogue One run on.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, this is a character that idolizes everything the Jedi are about, but she's Sith. And what does she do with this ideology of hers? She kills the bad people.
She kills other Sith.
So she's basically like the Dexter of the Sith.
Yeah, she is a serial killer that kills other serial killers. And as her recent development has shown, she's finally had the clairvoyance provided by a blunt tree, forced trauma, to say, I'm bad. I'm a bad person. That's character
bad
growth.
llama. Bad llama.
Carl.
Oh, that's another thing. that brings up another point of character arcs. Like your character, your quote unquote alignment, it's not a static thing.
No, it changes.
Yeah, it changes, and things will affect you, and it will change the way you look at the world, and it will.
That's why I like the gray paths, because it's like, okay, you can be dark, you can be light. All you gotta do is flip a switch on the out of character side of things to say which side you're favoring at this moment in time. But it allows you're not stuck into any roles. which a lot of people look at the
I would-
path. They look at the path system and they go, "Well, you're a Sith, so you need to act one way." So they're going to write this person like a Sith if they've never written with them before. Maybe that person doesn't act like a Sith.
I really, really want to do a Doctor Horrible Sith character. Just like maybe even with musical interludes. I don't know.
All
Like,
right,
we need
so
to get Neil Patrick Harris in on this shit.
when we doing our musical ACC tournament.
Oh, yes.
But that aside, it's literally I guess if there's a parting message I want to give to anyone who happens to be listening to our rant this long, don't typecast. Don't fall into the rut. Don't sink into this mold and be like, well, this is what I am now. You're not. Your character is so much complexity that perhaps you never wrote them with that intention. But when other people get involved and start writing these characters and it contributes to your canon, it becomes something so much more. You can take avenues you never thought you were going to take. Your character can become something you never intended. And you might like where you end up.
The only thing I would like to add to that is that don't be afraid of the other ends of the spectrum. Don't feel like you have to be gray because you don't necessarily fit, what you think a Jedi is or whatever. Like there's diversity even within those spectrums of being Jedi or Sith too. And look at Qui-Gon, for example. I mean, like he didn't exactly follow what it meant to be a Jedi, but he was still a Jedi at the end of the day. I think a lot of people feel pulled to be gray because they have these very narrow conceptions of what Sith and Jedi are, and I'm hoping the new canon will kind of open that up a little bit.
Yeah, I am too. I feel that for all the things that Disney has the potential of doing wrong with Star Wars, they're doing so much right now.
Well, they have some very talented people up there at that story group, and they know what they're doing. And Disney, you don't get to be a multi-billion-dollar enterprise without sort of knowing what they're doing. I mean, look what they've done with Marvel. I mean, they pretty much let the comic book people do comic book stuff, and it's paid dividends for them. And they're letting the really core Star Wars people do their thing, and they're kind of like not really being that heavy-handed on it.
Well, that's the thing. The people doing Star Wars right now are fans. They love Star Wars. The person who wrote the Ahsoka novel, that's her favorite character. Then you have, as much as I don't like his writing, the Aftermath trilogy, his ideas are great. And this is a guy who literally creamed his pants when he was offered the chance to write Star Wars.
Wouldn't we all?
Right? So I think the groundwork is there for a wonderful, long investment into this genre. I'm just worried their one release a year approach is going to cause burnout.
Oh, yeah. If not a little bit of degradation in the quality.
Well,
that's what I always worry about.
They're doing the anthologies and the Star Wars stories as their between episodes thing, so they can keep it fresh by changing up what they're doing there, changing up the genre, changing up the source material. It can be very confusing to a reader or a viewer, because even my boss on Friday, I'm like, yeah, 2 weeks until Rogue One, and he's like, are they going to be bringing back any of the characters from The Force Awakens? I'm like, this is a prequel to Episode 4. And he's like, oh. I'm like, yeah. So,
did you not see the big ass Death Star in the commercial?
It's like, you know that part where they say the Death Star plans have been stolen? This is that.
Many Bothans.
No, that's the second Death Star.
Yeah, whatever. I want to see a Bothan, damn it.
Yeah, like they've what's really interesting about that is the Rebels guy has been toying with some redesigns of what Bothans look like, because they were the spy network of the extended universe, but no one knows what they look like. So he had a few designs.
Don't change the look of them. They looked so good before.
Well, the concept art at this is the last thing, our tangent. We're on tangent time now, folks. So if you were done with our discussion, you can leave. More or less, it was kind of like wolfish. They're keeping that wolfish canine kind of thing to them.
The half equine, half canine.
Yeah, very lycanthrope like. Anyways, Turel, it has been an unexpected pleasure talking with you about this because you really brought a lot of knowledge that I frankly wasn't expecting. So I love you.
I love you too. I don't know how to take that. I'm going to take it as a compliment.
It is a compliment.
I enjoyed you being on the show.
I was pleasantly surprised by the depth of discussion we were able to have on a topic as touchy as religion, frankly.
And not nearly as many just awkward silences as we usually have.
I mean,
Well,
I
I'm
can
a lawyer.
provide.
I'm gonna talk. If you need me to talk, I'm gonna talk. I mean, that's what I do. But
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, listeners. Thank you, Turel. Thank you, Q, for putting up with my everything.
I always put up with you. That's just what I do.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. You're my own staff.
All right, folks. Thank you for listening in. Tune in next time for probably going to be talking about sex and other non-PG-13 stuff.
And a
how to fit
shorter
that into-
episode.
And a shorter episode, hopefully.
my.
All right.
Hey, as always, if you have more topics that you'd like to hear about, feel free to email me, hit me up on Telegram. Don't talk to Atra. He'll probably bitch at me for getting more messages than he already gets.
No, my door is missing. Just walk right in. I mean, you might get a little singed, breathing fire and whatnot. But yeah, have fun.
That's our show.
Bye.